Hello, everyone. I know that we are about a week and a half away from your first submissions, and it seems a little daunting. Um, that maybe it was a long time ago since I went over the introduction section, and um, you may have lost the paperwork. It was, in the first 4 weeks of class, and now we're at the end. Um, Normally, when you guys write your method section, I give it back to you with all the corrections, and we didn't get a chance to do that because we weren't allowed to be in class. So I am here to verbally go over the expectations and what I am looking for your first submission. And then based on that, I will correct it. And when you make those corrections, your paper is basically halfway done for the final paper. So what normally happens during this first submission, obviously this week, you are looking for your 2 additional articles just to show me that you have them. So that's a really easy 10 points for you guys to earn just to make sure you have articles. Now your articles don't have to be factorial. They don't have to be 2 by 2. I know we practiced that for the seed article because the original experiment that you're quote unquote virtually doing or proposing is, or hypothetical, is a 2 by 2. And so I wanted you to be able to figure out how to look that up because that's what we would have done in class. And then we would have done these actually in groups. For this assignment, I asked you guys to propose a slightly different version of the seed article. So everybody's seed article, which you can obviously grab from here, is your first article for your introduction section. And the other 2 articles that you find should be related to the original article, and if you, depending on how you changed your IVs or your DV, or I know at least one person changed it to cheating on your significant other as opposed to cheating on in a game or cheating on a test or something like that. So however you sort of modified your proposal, you should make sure you have an article that kind of incorporates that too, if you can. So 3 articles minimum, the seed article, which everyone has, and then 2 additional articles that you guys find. It should be an experimental, right? IV and DV, but you don't need a factorial design specifically. And if it has more than one experiment in it, kind of like the seed article, we only really concentrated on the last one, which was experiment 5. If you have an article that has 2 experiments, 3 experiments in it, you really only have to worry about one. So I just wanted to show you this before we got into the actual tutorial, because we did it in class before the craziness. It's easy to have lost sight and lost paperwork for the introduction and reference section. So here I provided the introduction section document again and the reference list one, and I'm going to go over that. And here is my tutorial on what on this paper and what is expected. That's where I'll put the link to this video here. Obviously, for the format of a method section, you can also review our Stroop task slides that we did in class. And in that way, you at least see the sections and subsections. So just to remind you, method section is bold, and the word method, not methods, method, see, just a D, no S, is bold and centered in the middle of the page when you get to that portion. And then all of the subsections, which are in order: participants, design, materials and apparatus, and procedure. Those are going to be in bold, not italic or anything like that, in bold. And those are going to be on the left-hand side, right? The subheadings. For the introduction, the only thing you need for the first submission is the introduction itself, the method section based on your proposal, and the references of the 3 at least articles that you referenced in the introduction. So that's what's needed for this 50-point project. Do you need a title page for this? Not for the first submission, you do not, but if you want to practice the title page next week, before this is due, I'm going to put out a tutorial and a document on how to, like I did with the discussion section, on how to do the title page and how to do the abstract, and how to graph in Excel. So all of that stuff will be coming next week. But if you wanted to look it up, title page is relatively easy to do. So if you wanted to try it and maybe see if it's correct, I will give you feedback on it, but you don't need it. You only need the introduction, the method, and the reference section. So let's go back to the introduction. I apologize, my computer does not give you the cool little upside down triangle, but that's all that was in this spot right here. So when you're writing your introduction section, the first thing I want you to know is that it is not like the method section in the fact that you do not need a heading at the top. You're basically just going to go straight into the paper as if you were writing a paper for like an English class. I want you to indent in the introduction. I want you to, obviously the format of the paper is double spaced and 12-point times New Roman font. That is APA. I'm not going to make you worry about page numbers and things like that. That's going to come the last week where we talk about all the little APA things. But if you do, the page numbers are going to be up here in the right-hand corner. And the introduction is actually going to, when you turn in the full paper, it's going to be page 3, because you're going to have a title page that doesn't have a page number on it, and you're going to have an abstract for page 2. The abstract is its own page, and then the introduction actually starts on page 3. You don't need to worry about page numbers or anything like that for the first submission. I'm just giving you that heads up for when we turn this into the final paper. In an introduction section, you're justifying the reasons for writing about your topic. So you're going to go from very broad to very specific. In this case, the first paragraph is if you're introducing schizophrenia, if you're introducing cheating and creativity, whatever you're doing, you're going to start very broad and you're going to make it very specific. So the first paragraph is just basically introducing your topic, right? So I could say like schizophrenia affects 1% of the population. It has 3 main clusters of symptoms: positive, negative, and cognitive deficits. For the Stroop task that we did, it's about attention and brain processes, right? So for this one, the first paragraph could be something like, the nature of attention has been one of central concerns of experimental psychology since its inception. So let's just concentrate on maybe cheating, right? In the original seed article that I gave you guys, basically the background was talking about how people that cheat on games or tests or something like that have the tendency to lie more about it, and that ability to lie and make up new things may lead to greater creativity. So in the first paragraph, you might want to introduce the idea of lying as a way to, I don't know, make up stories, and by making up stories, that could lead to creativity. Or you can just talk about creativity first and introduce that in your introduction. Creativity is defined as, or something like that, if you wanted to use that to introduce your topic, right? Then once your topic is introduced, then you get a little more specific. So it's about a paragraph of your introduction, right? First line doesn't even talk about the Stroop effect. It's just one paragraph. The first paragraph is just introducing the topic and kind of bringing it into what we're talking about. And then you have your previous research. So your second, your third, and your fourth paragraphs of the introduction are just going to be a paragraph that is introducing your topic. I'm sorry, your articles. So you would say in the, and don't use wording like in the seed article. You would say in an article by, and remember we talked about this for APA formatting, looking here, right? So going into point 2, you're either going to name the authors, and then if you name the authors, you put the year of publication in parentheses, or you can say something like, a study was conducted on cheating and blah, blah, blah. And before you end that, then you would say, James, 1890 in parentheses. So here in this handout, the person wrote, James emphasized the selective aspects of attention and regarded attention as a process of taking obsession by the mind in clear and vivid form of of one out of what seems several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought. So, a couple things here. If you say their name first, instead of just saying an article that's centered on blah, 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 then you just write James, and in parentheses for the proper citation, you put the year of publication. So he did it again here. Others such as Moray, 1969, and Posner, 1975. Here we have Posner and Snyder, Schriffen and Schneider, right? All of these things. Another thing they did here was if you are using quotation marks to quote. Now, I don't like that. Most psych papers don't use that unless you really specifically need to quote. We just paraphrase, right? And for your second, third, and fourth paragraphs, when you are reviewing the literature, this is your literature review, instead of doing it like this, where this person clearly had 20 or more papers to reference, you only have 3 minimum. Maybe some of you can have 4 or 5 if you really want to. Does that mean you need to add them all in here? No, but you could if you wanted to. So because we are only dealing with a minimum of 3, each paragraph is just going to be based on 1 citation. So 2 things I wanted to point out. If you're using quotation marks, you do have to cite the page number afterwards. So here, they actually said, taking obsession by the mind in clear and vivid form, blah, 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 and end quote, then you put the page number. You do not need to put a page number if you're paraphrasing, and I encourage you to paraphrase. There's no need to quote. One of the other habits that students have, because they're so used to MLA format and not APA format, is the fact that in an MLA English paper, you guys write the name of the articles. Please, please don't do that here. Just say a study was done by, or research, previous research looked at, a study by James, parentheses 1890. So that's a big no-no. Do not write the name of the article. That goes in the reference section. That's all we need. So second, third, and fourth paragraphs are going to be 1 paragraph reviewing each one. So stepping away from this a little bit, basically, I want you to summarize your paper in one, your reference in 1 paragraph. The other thing I needed to point out is that once you name or cite the reference in a paragraph, you don't need to do it again. So if you're going to talk about a paper up here, right, by William James, you would say James emphasized blah, blah, blah. Since you guys are concentrating your full paragraph just to that 1 paper, you only need to cite it once. Previous studies looked at cheating in relationships and the ability to lie. And then you'd put parentheses, Duong, 2019, right? Once you did that, that's the first sentence of your paragraph. So for your paragraph, I want sort of a background information. So that could be just what the study was about, what they did in 1 sentence. So a very brief, they used a RAT task, blah, 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 to look at creativity of people who had cheated on a game task. They found that the people who cheated, in the group that cheated, tended to be more creative according to the RAT scores. What's this implication, right? The implication is, and then that's sort of the last paragraph. So 1 paragraph about what the background of the experiment was or what they studied, 1 sentence on what they did, very brief, you don't need to get into it, maybe 2 sentences if it's a little more complicated, 1 sentence on what they found, this study found, or the authors found, or you can, if it's James found that people who cheated were more likely to be more creative on this test. And then what does it mean, right? So we want to tie it together with that last sentence. So this may indicate, or this indicates, right, that lying may be part, and cheating may be a good part of the creative process. And then you're going to do that for your other 2 articles that you have picked out. So start with the seed article. Don't call it the seed article. It's just a seed article because it's the seed from where your current version of it grew. So don't say in the seed article. Again, just like the other articles you are finding or have found, you are going to say a study on blah, 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 or a study by blah, 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 Remember that if there is one name, you're going to just say James and then the year, or James, comma, 1890. If there's two names, you use an ampersand, right? Horowitz and Horowitz, because Dr. C is hanging out. If you have three or more names, you just use et al. So if there were three people writing the paper, Cardona, comma, Valdez, comma, and Santiago, you can name all of them, or you can just say Carmona, comma, et al. Et period, al period, comma, and the year. What et al means is and the rest. So let's say all of us in this class decided to write a paper and we all got credit for it. I'm not writing everybody's name down. And in the reference section, it would just say, maybe if I was the first author, Horowitz, comma, et al. Horowitz and the rest. So paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 are going to be just your quick one paragraph summary of the 3 articles you have. If you want to summarize more, you can add another paragraph to it. If you have a 4th article, you can sneak it in somewhere if it's really close to one of the other 2 articles, or you don't have to mention it at all. The next one is then you want a, since you've talked about the previous research, now you're focusing it and getting a little more specific into what you are hypothesizing and what the current study actually did. So in the 4th paragraph or so, right, I'm sorry, 5th paragraph, because you have the introductory paragraph, you have the 3 reference paragraphs from your previous articles. Now you are bridging it together. In the previous studies, comma, they looked at blah, blah, blah. And then what's the new one, right? I know that for most of you, it's just one little thing. You changed it to cheating on a significant other. You changed it to gender instead of, priming condition or something like that. So in the previous study showed this, and then you're transitioning it to what you're doing. So you're making it, again, more specific. You're getting towards a very specific point. So in the current study, and you can say I or you can say we. I'm used to we because you're normally in a group when you do it. If you want to use I, we don't normally do that in papers, but feel free because this is a unique situation. But go with we. Pretend that you have your own staff of researchers, right? So the current study looked at gender and cheating, and were males more likely to right? You don't even have to 3 to 4 sentences maybe. This is what previous studies did. This is the direction of the new study that you proposed. And then the last paragraph is just your hypotheses. Based on this, you know your 2 IVs and your DV, so you're going to have 3 hypotheses. So the last part says provide your hypotheses. Again, what do we expect? A main effect of, let's say that you kept cheating condition, right? So it was cheating at a game. And so what we had was, in the original article, obviously, the seed article was opaque versus transparent. In the opaque, people had the chance to, after a virtual coin flip or whatever it was, they had the chance to say up or down after it was done. So they had the chance to cheat because it had already been flipped and you saw it before you gave your answer. You're giving your answer retroactively. That gives you the ability to cheat. If you thought heads and it came up tails, you could easily say tails, right? So in the first, in the transparent one, you had to call it out before the task was done. So you would say, main effect of type of cheating, and if you kept opaque and transparent, you would think those in the opaque cheating condition would be more creative, score higher on that test than the transparent condition that couldn't cheat. And then we use gender. So we predicted that men overall would be more likely to lie, therefore would be more creative on a RAT test. And, and we predict an interaction between cheating condition and gender, right? So those are your 3 hypotheses. That's how you end your introduction section. Remember, there's no introduction title. You just go straight into it as if you're writing a paper. I want, in the introduction section, a couple things really quickly. I want to make sure you know that you are going to indent like you would in a regular paper, and everything is past tense. Remember, even though this is a hypothetical proposal that you just gave me, you're writing this as if you actually created and actually conducted this experiment. So everything in the introduction section, remember that when you turn in a manuscript, it's as if you already did the experiment. So everything's in past tense as if you already did it. The current study looked at, right? Not is going to look at. This is assuming you've already done it. So make sure that everything's in past tense. Again, when you cite, you only need to cite one author per paragraph because you're only doing one paper per paragraph. You're not doing it like interspliced like this. So in that one paragraph, you do the citation once at the end of the sentence that you refer to it, whether it's the name of the author or whether it's what the study is looking at, and then that's it. So those are the basically 6 paragraphs. You have your introduction of the broad topic, you have your previous research, which is your literature review, starting with the seed article, and then your 2 additional articles that you found. Your bridge to previous studies showed this. In the current study, we looked at blah, blah, blah. That might only be 3 sentences, right? And then your hypotheses or predictions. Can you turn that into one paragraph? A lot of times people do. So, and if it's not going to be 4 sentences, maybe your transition from what previous studies did to what your study did, and the hypotheses can be in the same paragraph, right? If your transition paragraph is a little longer, then split it up. It doesn't really matter, formatting wise. So that's the introduction. Let me go back again to the references. So, oh, and let me tell you this. Once the introduction is done, let's say that you are, if you're at the bottom of the page here, right in the next line, you're gonna, center it. It would be centered here, I think, right? Make sure it's centered. And then you would write method, right? But that might be going on the other page, or it's just not going to happen because I'm not able to mess with this document. But basically, if your paper ends, or your introduction section ends here, you don't automatically, or even if it ends up here, you don't automatically start the method on a different page. This is not like that. The 4 main sections of a paper, the introduction, the method, the results, the discussion, are all continuous. So the only reason that the next section would be on the top of the next page is if you ended right at the very bottom of the page, and when you hit enter, it went to the next page. But if you're up here, right, you could just do this. I don't know if it'll let me do it, and center it, and then you would put your method here and bold, right? Bold, and it would go right after. So those 4 sections, those 4 main sections of the paper are going one right after the other as if it's one continuous section. The only thing that separates it is something like this, the heading, right? So don't put your method on a separate page. That's not APA style. The 4 sections go after the abstract, and if I were to do this, the reference section then would be on a separate page. So if we centered it again here, oops, center, and then we wrote references. References will be bold at the top, but the reference section is going to be its own page, right? So getting to the reference section really quick, and then we'll jump back to the method section because I want to be pretty clear about what you're supposed to do there. So the reference list, unlike MLA format, which anything that inspired you, anything that you took a letter from goes in your bibliography. In this case with the reference list, just to remind you, the same amount of articles that you have that you cite in your paper are going to be in your reference section. So it's always going to match. I made it pretty easy for you. 3 references, 3 citations, no more, no less. Your seed article and the other 2. And so they will be on their own page at the end. Even though you listed your seed article first, remember that when we write these references, we are going alphabetically by the first author's name. And if you look at the actual first submission assignment, I wrote that in there. Here is what your journal article looks like. This is what we're going to follow here. Author, it's the last name, comma, first initial. Sometimes it's first 2 initials, first name, middle name, if you want. So Horowitz, comma, B, period, 2019, right? And then title of the article. In this case, this article would be called My Research Methods Class Rocks. Look at the format here for APA style. So author AB, if it's one person, it's just their last name, comma, first initial. Title of the article. So look at all the periods here. Look at the parentheses here. Here's the title of the article. That's in regular 12-point Times New Roman font. Name of the journal and volume number are in italics. So come up here and hit the I button or hit Control I, whatever documents, Google Docs or Word doc that you're doing. And the volume number is also in italics, and then whatever page number of the article. So if this was in an article, if this was in Journal of Awesome Classes, volume 1, sometimes issue 2, so volume 1, issue 1, and then the page numbers 12 through 20, right? If there are 2 authors, like you see here for the book, it's the first author ampersand second author. So Horowitz, comma, B, and Horowitz, comma, C, right? Title of the book, blah, blah, blah. So if it's a book, you'd put the location and publisher. We're not worrying about that. We're only doing journal article ones right here, right? If it's a chapter in a book, again, if you have 3 or, don't worry about chapter, just look at the number of authors. For 3 or more authors, I just say et al. Use et al, right? So this paper was written by author AB and others is what it's saying. So look at this citation here. For 3 or more authors on your paper, Horowitz, B, et al., which means and the rest, 2015, this research methods class rocks, Journal of Awesome Classes, volume 1, issue 1 in parentheses. You can see that the journal, see the periods, right? Journal of Awesome Classes, volume 1, issue 1 is in italic, comma, and then here's just the page numbers, 1 through 10, which is not in italics. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to do that for your seed article. You're going to do it for the 2 additional papers that you had. And just make sure whoever the first author was, that's the alphabetical order of their last name. So if there was one that was, as I just mentioned earlier, Cardona, comma, et al., that would go ahead of Horowitz because the first author, Cardona, C, is comes before H in the alphabet, right? Even if it's 2 authors with the same name. So let's say that Dr. C wrote his own paper about the future of research methods because maybe he'll teach it one day, right? Mm-hmm. So you'd have Cardona et al., you'd have Horowitz B et al., and then you'd have Horowitz C because he's his own first author. He's the only one that wrote the paper. So Horowitz B comes before Horowitz C, and that's how you would put it in alphabetical order. Again, just if you need to look up, you can always look up online, or if you have the APA style guide, look that up for your for tips on how to do that right. So the only thing I haven't gone over yet is the method section, and I don't really have anything to go on, so I'm just going to give you this background again. For the method section, this is where you had practice writing the method section for the Stroop task. Obviously, you know, whatever you turned in, you probably have an electronic copy of it still. So you can use that sort of to reference, right? Or you can go back and look at the Stroop task 4 sections. Again, even though you're proposing this or you had proposed it, you are writing the method section as if you have already conducted the experiment. So for participants, that depends on what you do, right? So what we would normally do in class is make it conducive to college students because that's who you would run the experiment on. So if your original seed article was a paper for a children's study, you would change it to be people in the class, right? And this time you have the creative freedom to figure out whoever you want. So if you changed it to gender, your males and females could be any ages you want or things like that. What we normally do, what I normally have my students do before they run their experiments and turn this in, is to predict that we had 40 students because that's our average. For this and for the data set I'm going to give you next week or in 2 weeks, I am going to ask for just say 80 participants. Remember that when you're writing the number of participants that we use the word. So 80 would be EIGHTY, not 80. Everywhere else, you know, if you're going to say, you know, especially if it's gender, you're probably going to want to make it even, 40 males and 40 females, right? And you can make up their demographics or whatever. You can say ages, you know, 16 to 40 or whatever you want to say. If you want to do it on older, if you think it works better for older adults and you want to see if cheating versus younger and older people, if that was one of your IVs, right, that you changed, you could list it however you want. So the participants, you could still say undergraduate students in a research methods class, like you did for the one, because you would assume that we would have done it in class. You can say that, right? So who were the participants? Just hypothetically say 80, because that's the number we're going to go with for the study. If there were any screenings that you said, anybody with corrective lenses that didn't have them, or anybody that was, you know, not of, you know, anybody that has been diagnosed with a mental illness was excluded from the study, or blah, 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 if you wanted to. For the design, remember that it is a 2x2. And I would stick with the between subjects. If you really propose something, and I didn't look at all of them yet, I will by tomorrow. Between subjects factorial design. Scale of measurement, if we're doing a test like this, unless you made up your own DV as a change, would be like the score on your RAT test or score on a cheating test, whatever you want to call it. So that's part of the design. That's where you would just, right, list and operationally define your IVs and DVs. And because it's a RAT, the scale of measurement would be ratio. You're not looking at a 1 to 7 Likert scale. If you change your DV to do that, right, well, then maybe you would say interval, right, instead. For the materials and apparatus, this is where you guys would normally make your own materials for your groups. And so you'd have your own surveys and your own videos and any sort of things that you needed. But this is not the case now. So here you could kind of be creative and come up with your own things to that you would include. If you barely changed from this actual seed article, then maybe you want to keep a lot of the same materials that were used in the original one. For this DV, if you kept the RAT test, I don't think it really said in the article the questions that were on it. So one of the things that I want you to do to be creative is, let's say that you came up with a test called the, you know, the cheating creativity test or something like that instead of the RAT, and you can change it to something else. I don't need you to create a whole survey for this, but what I would like you to do is just give me 1 or 2 sample questions that you could have asked, right? So you can pretend that those 2 questions were part of this survey. So maybe it's a, you know, you're asking questions about thinking outside the box, or you're asking a question about a creative response, like how many ways you can use a pencil, right? And some people can say, right, in that, you know, something like that, because a pencil could be obviously used to write with, but there could be other things. A pencil could be used as a weight to hold paper down. It could be used as a sharp object to stab somebody. Hopefully you never do that, but right, thinking of different ways and trying to be more creative about how many different ways you can do that, right? So I just want 2 sample questions from a survey or questionnaire or something that you're using to, you know, questions that you're using to assess creativity or whatever it is. And if you changed it to something else, just figure out maybe just 2 questions. And so you would put those questions in. Remember, like for the Stroop task, we had the whole block randomization and blah, 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 blah. And you listed all the words and all the colors and all of that. So you don't have to make it that complicated this time. It's a lot easier, hopefully, because we don't have this. It's kind of hypothetical. So the only thing you really need to come up with on your own, and it should make sense, is just 2 questions from this task, and you can name it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be the RAT, or you can just say, yeah, this is my version of the RAT, or the 2020 version of it. And then the last one is procedures, and procedures is really the only one. That's the one where you're really going to make this stuff up. You can use pretty much some of the same format of how the cheating one was done, but this is where your hypothetical experiment becomes yours. Again, you can use bullet points like we did on the original Stroop task, and instead of writing in sentences, or you can number it step 1, step 2, step 3, or things like that. So for the procedures, think about how you would want your study to be run. If it looks a lot like the seed article one, I can't fault you for that, because it's very close to it, right?
Right.
Almost like a replication. But if you changed it more, like, again, cheating on your significant other as opposed to cheating on a test, then it's really up to you. And this is where you get to be creative about the step-by-step, how you would have them do something.
Yeah.
So how would you have a test that you ask them? Would you just have a question on a survey that just said, have you ever cheated on your significant other, and hope that they were truthful? That could be step 1. Step 1 is you gave them a questionnaire for a pretest, and that it asked a bunch of questions, and maybe the only one that counted was, have you ever cheated on your significant other? That would be step 1. Then you could put them into groups based on that one, and maybe gender or cheating condition or things like that. So remember that in the within subjects one, we talked about how the original researcher, which was me, randomly selected 10 students and brought them outside, or 8 students, whatever it was. So in this case, you get to come up with your own way to run this. And although that may sound, you're like, I'm not a creative person. Yes, you are. Just prove it to yourself. So just think of step by step how you would run it. There may be more steps, there may be less steps than somebody else, but this is the one where you actually get to be creative. So this is where I would look for plagiarism. So don't work with other people on it. You may be able to get suggestions from others, but this is one where you don't want to work with your classmates on this, because if I see your step by step looking really close to somebody else's, that's not good. I don't like that. So first submission, again, just to run down the list, start with the introduction. Do not write the word introduction. It is optional if you want to put a title page in front of it, but you just start on the first line indented with the introduction. Do not write the title of the article. Make sure you put your citations in for the author's name or names and the year of publication. Only one citation per paragraph, and only one article per paragraph to make it easier for you guys. So 3 paragraphs for 3 articles. So once the introduction section is done, right after, the next line, bold and centered, is method. And then the next line on the left-hand side and bolded is participants. And you would go straight from the introduction to the method. The only thing separating those 2 sections is the word method in bold. And remember that in the method section that we don't indent. Everything is there. In the method section, you're also using past tense. And you're going to pretend that everything that you have written has already been done, that your article, your experiment has already been finished, and this is part of the manuscript that you wrote afterwards. So everything is in past tense. Past tense. The only thing that will be in present tense in the entire paper is when you talk about future directions of the study or of the topic in your discussion section for your final paper. So introduction, then method section right away with your own procedures, right? And then the references is on a separate page in the back. References has the word references in bold in the back, centered like the word method. And then the references themselves, please, again, go to the reference list and see how they're listed with the author's name, the year, the title, and then the journal name and volume in italics, and the page number is not in italics at the end. make sure that those 3 references have at least a double space in between them. And a lot of times you're able to copy and paste from some sort of, if they're in the right format when you look them up, maybe in psych articles or psych info or whatever. So that's it. So probably maybe 2 pages or so for sometimes a little more for the introduction, maybe 2 to 3 pages for the method section, kind of like what we did with the Stroop task, and then 1 page, obviously, for 3 or 4 or 5 references. Any other questions you have, please reach out to me during office hours or reach out to me via email or something like that, and I'll talk to you soon.